everyone, welcome back to another video created to help guide your faith group discussion or personal Bible study. Today we're diving into a topic we could all probably reflect more on: empathy and its role in relationships. In this video, you'll watch clips from a message delivered by our lead pastor, Pastor Mike, about the significance of empathy. He'll unpack the importance of empathy when building any sort of relationship. So, whether you're unsure about how to be there for someone in your life who's struggling, or you want to deepen your emotional connections in your life, this message will help us look at examples of empathy in the Bible and teach us how we can apply them to our lives. To help you reflect further, we've created a PDF with reflection and discussion questions. You can find the link to it in the video description and comments below. But don't feel like you have to get through all of the questions. Let them be a guide and just focus on what resonates with you and your group. And hey, if you're not currently part of a faith group, we encourage you to consider joining one. They're an amazing way to help build your community, grow your faith, and have meaningful conversations like this. Visit our website at faithma.org to learn more and find a group that best fits you. We are so glad you're here, and we hope this video blesses and inspires you. Let's get started.
Think of all the relationships we have in our life. We wanted to look at what I call the underground river skills. These are the skills that run underneath every relationship. And if you work on these skills, all these other issues could find resolution in your relationships, whatever they are. So we decided to look at 4 lifelong skills for building healthy relationships: to be empathetic, to be honest, to be selfless, and to be present. And so today, what we're going to talk about is how to be empathetic. So empathy is a hard word to define. Here's the definition of empathy from Merriam-Webster Dictionary: the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another. I told you, it's hard to define, right? Some people understand empathy by comparing it to sympathy. Because sympathy is a feeling of sincere concern for someone who's experiencing something difficult or painful. Empathy involves actively sharing in the emotional experience of the other person. To simplify, sympathy is, I feel bad for you, and then I go on with my day. Empathy is, oh, I feel what you're going through, and I take action on it. Let me give you some examples from the life of Jesus, because it helps us flesh out a little bit about empathy versus sympathy and the importance of empathy in our relationships. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." What a heartbreaking statement. How many of us prayed something like, "God, why did you not act?" When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And Jesus wept. One of the few, if not only time in the Bible where we have testament of Jesus crying. And the Jews said, "See how much he loved them." Now, what's interesting, if you know this story, I would have said something like, "Mary, don't worry, we're going to turn this funeral into a party," right? Because at the end of the story, what's he going to do? He's going to raise Lazarus from the dead. But he doesn't. He cries. Why does he cry? Because Jesus is resonating with the grief and sorrow of the people around him. He's viscerally experiencing their sorrow to a point where it moves him to tears. Empathy is an emotional connection that causes you to feel some of what the other person is feeling. There's another scene from the life of Jesus. Large crowds followed Jesus as he came down from the mountainside, and suddenly a man with leprosy approached him. Stop for a second. In the first century, that word, the ancient word for leprosy, could mean a string of skin diseases. It could mean leprosy, which is a horrific disease that disfigured people. But skin diseases in general were dangerous in that ancient world because there were no antibiotics, no treatments. People who'd get infections would often die from an infection. And because they didn't understand infections, they would just, "Hey, you got a skin problem? Go." And when I mean go, it was like leave your home, leave your village, and go live in the wilderness. Jesus reached out and touched him. The question is why did he touch him? Because he cared about the person's heart, mind, soul, and body. He physically touched an individual who hadn't been touched in a long time, was alienated, ostracized, and alone, and living in fear. And Jesus chose to heal his heart and his soul and his mind as well as his body. This is what empathy moves us to do, is to care about the whole person. One last story about Jesus. So you should know that Jesus just heard that his cousin, John, sometimes known as John the Baptist, has been executed. And it was a blow to Jesus emotionally. So as soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. But the crowds heard where he was headed and followed him on foot from many towns. Jesus heard the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them and healed the sick. This is remarkable because Jesus is not in a good place. Jesus is dealing with sorrow and grief and probably anger, and he's thinking about his own future. His emotions are so boiling up inside of himself that he just wants to get away. And the minute he does, what happens is the crowd who have seen Jesus bring healing and hope to people are chasing after him. And as it happens, the crowd grows. So he gets off the boat. And this word, compassion, this is a powerful word. This is used often in the New Testament. And what it means is you feel it in your gut. Jesus got off the boat and he so felt it inside of himself, all the suffering around him, that he put aside his agenda, set aside his needs, and cared for them. An emotional connection drove him to put aside his needs and agenda to care for people in need. Empathy is critical to building strong relationships. And I understand why we hesitate to read this, because it's hard to walk into empathy. It's much easier to live in sympathy. So how can we build empathy? How can we learn this skill? Here's some advice, and at the end, a couple of don'ts, and a warning too. Empathy means we start by respecting a person's emotions. Right? This is from Peter. Now here we are. Peter, who followed Jesus, was mentored by Jesus, and there, finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic. Now, we just criticize sympathy because I'm looking at it from 2025 American perspective, but in the ancient perspective, sympathy was to feel with you. Don't silver line the situation. Silver lining is when we try to make somebody feel better with a phrase or platitude that really diminishes or excuses their emotions. Well, look at the great Paul, one of our great apostles, and all of the theology that he developed. He told us, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Paul doesn't say rejoice with those who mourn, or at least they're in a better place. That may be true, but they're not in your place, at your home. Empathy, what helps a lot, especially with anxiety disorders, is what I call appropriate touch. Now hear me out on this, because I know it's a little bit of a controversial idea. But look at Jesus. Again, Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. These are blind people. He didn't have to touch them. He chose to touch them because they've been wandering through life without physical contact. And so Jesus reaches out to touch them, and immediately they receive their sight and follow him. Something that I call appropriate touch. Appropriate touch, think of car. Comfortable, appropriate, and relationship. Some people aren't comfortable with being touched. This is especially true with people who have been abused, right? People who have been mistreated. So all sexual abuse, physical abuse, all of that, right? In that case, touching is not a good thing. So I never initially touch unless I have a relationship with somebody. And even it's what type of relationship do I have? Do they feel comfortable with me touching them? Are we friends? Are we family? Have we had evidence that a touch would be an appropriate thing in this relationship? A couple of warnings when it comes to empathy. Don't get lost and don't get stuck. But the goal of empathy is action. How do I help you get out of the pit? To build a connection of relationship when you're with that person, to try to move out of the danger or the struggle that they're facing. So we get lost sometimes. We get stuck in a situation with a person. And really what they need is they need to learn to move on from sorrow or from grief or from fear or how to manage their anxieties. Empathy may force you to confront your biases and your prejudice. If you want to be like Jesus, if you want to follow the instruction of the first church, if you want to walk in the path of Christianity that's been out there for 2,000 years, you're going to confront barriers in your life with people you don't like, and you're going to have to ask the question, can I be empathetic even for them?